for the reduction in price. Also, the relative price of chickpeas at the planting time did not look terribly favourable to that of cereals, which was coming off the problems in Northern Hemisphere. Seasonal conditions throughout this year have been very favourable, meaning we've had low disease problems and certainly slightly above average yields. Early harvest quality was very good, but heavy rain once again, still with the La Nina influence, meant that the last 30% of the harvest, mainly in New South Wales, was of poor quality and meant that 5 to 10% of the crop was abandoned, and the balance of that New South Wales 30% had a varying degree of quality issues. Quality problems this year have ranged from slightly darker outer shells through very dark in colour and damage to the pea itself. I think it's worth noting that the GDA export standards under which most chickpeas from Australia are traded allows for some discoloration of the outer shell. While it's a subjective analysis, it allows for product to be of light or medium brown in colour. So I think it's important because I think there's certainly some misapprehension on that. This allows for product with minor rain damage to be received and classified as number 1 grade. The main focus of the standard is to ensure that the inner pea is sound and of good yellow golden appearance. Standards are therefore really aimed at mainly the milling market, not the whole eating markets in Bangladesh and so forth, where outer shell appearance is more critical. On the demand side, domestic milling requirements in Australia, while small, are growing gradually. I guess on the whole, our costs of milling are much higher than in other parts of the world. Grower attention for seed requirements will be higher as expectations for the 2012-13 plantings will increase by about 20%. It's a little early to be making too many projections on next year's plantings. We won't plant until April, May. But I think at this stage, the fact that we've had high rainfall throughout the summer months means that we've got very good subsoil moisture, and I think that's encouraging for the planting of particularly chickpeas. One of the things that I would say once again is, as other speakers have said, is the final plantings of peas will very much depend on the relative pricing to other commodities and also other pulses. There's a lot of faba beans also grown in the areas where chickpeas are grown, Desi chickpeas are grown, and at the moment the prices of those are very, very high and demand is very strong coming out of the Middle East. So we could see some of that additional production go to faba beans. Export demand continues to grow at a steady pace. The UAE is now a big market for Australian chickpeas, where product is processed for domestic consumption and re-exported to the Gulf countries, I think at the expense of India since the banning of exports. Bangladesh demand seems to be about unchanged, although like many countries, they appear to be struggling with US dollars in terms of financing to buy the product. For this reason, we expect demand from Bangladesh to be at a very low level, or at the lower end, I should say, of the normal range this year. However, will be earlier given that Ramadan is much earlier this year. And I think that's one of the interesting things this year is that some of the competing export countries like North Africa and so forth, their crop will probably not find its way into the subcontinent markets before Ramadan this year, which is in July. Pakistan has been a big importer in the last season, mainly of our water-damaged defective peas, and with reports of local production being cut by at least 50%, our expectation is demand will continue at a solid pace through 2012. They'll once again take firstly our defectives, but only a small volume of this was produced this season, and with very little carryover, we think they will eventually start buying number 1s. And in fact, in the last week or two, they have been doing that. India has traditionally been a major importer, and they have purchased significant tonnes in that period, November, December, January, just prior to their new crop harvest of their own. I think the most significant difference this year has been that compared to last year, the peas were actually shipped. Last year, in 2010, there was probably 150,000 tonne of peas sold, but only a very small proportion of that was actually shipped. Most was diverted to other countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh. So looking at the supply-demand, we'll try to get down to some real tin tacks. The carry-in was very small, 30,000 tonnes, virtually nothing. Production this year was around 360. At one point it looked like it might be closer to 400, but with the rains on the late crop, that certainly cut production back. So total supply of around 390,000 tonnes. Domestic use is relatively small in Australia. It's about 25,000 for milling purposes. This year we expect about 35,000 to be retained for seeding purposes, given the expected increased planting. Exports to date, we've seen it, in our view, we believe India has taken around 110,000. This is up until the end of January. Pakistan around 25, Bangladesh 25, the UAE 15 and other destinations around 5, leaving around 180,000 tonnes of total export demand. This leaves a remaining supply of around 150,000 tonnes, not very large. And when you look at between now and new crop, which is on November 1, what further demand we should see, you look at Bangladesh, would normally buy between 120 and 150,000 tonnes of chickpeas from Australia, having only taken 25, as we saw from the slide before. On the low side, we're saying 100,000 tonnes still to go. Pakistan, well, it's a very difficult situation to predict, but we think they'll take another 70. And the UAE, about another 50. India, well, we don't know. I guess it depends very much on what the local crop is going to look like. But even without India, if you do the numbers, we had 150,000 left to sell, and there's 220,000 there. So, yeah, we're in deficit. We'll have zero carry out of peas this year, and if for some reason in the second half of the year India is looking to import more DESI chickpeas, they won't be there. Simple as that. If I can just touch on dun peas very quickly. Unlike the DESI chickpeas, where we play a major role, I think, in the pricing globally, dun peas, we're more of a price taker, obviously in relation to the bigger yellow pea supplies in North America and in Europe. This year production will be around 300,000 tonnes. It's been that way for probably the last 2 or 3 years. While it's very much key in the rotations in the areas where they produced, it's not growing because simply compared to the price of cereals and other products, canola, etc., it's very low in price, and therefore the minimum quantity, if you like, required for rotations is grown. Domestic demand is about 120 to 150,000 tonnes, depending on the season and stock feed demand and so forth. So we have about 150,000 tonnes to export. Normally that would come to, if you like, particularly South India, Tuticorin and into Calcutta, into Sri Lanka and these places that prefer to use dun peas, the more bitter tasting pea. I think, and that's been the case probably for the last 2 or 3 years. I think the thing to watch this year is that at the moment I would put dun pea values at about 420 to 430 CFR into India. So they, while it might be very high in comparison to local prices here at the moment, it's very competitive with yellow peas out of Canada and out of France, etc. So, I mean, we may just see dun peas move into other markets this year, like Bangladesh and perhaps Pakistan, compared to previous years. So that concludes my presentation. I hope it was factual for you, and I would like to thank the organisers and Pravin in particular for inviting me to speak, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank the President, Mr. Pravin Dongre, who allows me to speak here today and to present the figures of Ukraine, France, and Russia. As I'm the last speaker today before the panel discussion, I will be very fast and hurry up to catch up a little bit of the lost time we had this morning. So we have just a couple of slides to present you with bar graphs and not so much figures and some explanations. First of all, we go to the area in Russia, France and Ukraine. The second presentation will be the yield per country and the production per country, chickpeas in Russia, the exports, and the summary of the total. So if we go to the exports, the red is Russia, yellow is for the Ukraine, and the blue one is for France. You see that France is a little bit stable. It's going from 112,000 hectares up to 230 because of the subsidy, which we talk on later on. We went down in 2011, and we will go down again in 2012 because of, we don't get the subsidy anymore. We had very low yields in France last year because of the dry weather, just before the flowering of the peas. Instead of having 4.7 tons per hectare, we had only 3.7. So there was a big loss. Farmers are disappointed. Wheat prices are good, so they say we will plant less peas. Ukraine is stable. We had some losses last year because of the weather in acreage. And if you look at Russia, Russia is growing. Went from 2009, 770,000 hectares, up to 1,770,000, excuse me, and I guess we will go slowly where the 1.1, 1.2 for Russia. So if you go to the yields, so what I just said before, again, blue is for France, the yellow for the Ukraine, and the red is for Russia. That will be on all the slides like this, on all the graphs. So you see France had in 2009 a yield of 4.4 tons, 870 kilos of yield per hectare, which is very high and normal for France. It's no exclusion. So if you go to the Ukraine and Russia, yes, they're more or less the same, 1.7, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. But you see in 2011 for France, it went down to 3.7. So that's why the farmers were disappointed about what they got. And they said, okay, we stop growing peas. So if we go to the, I have to push the button, I forgot this, sorry about it. So this is then the yields again. So the blue one, what I said before, is France, you 4.8, 4.6, and the red and the yellow are Russia and the Ukraine, which are then stable. So we go now to the production. The production in Russia, 1.7 million tons, 1.8 nearly for 2012. And I foresee, and I really think that we will go fast to 2.2, maybe 2.5 million tons in Russia. Russia has been a good supplier. Quality was good this year, was no problem. So they will be a country which you have to count on. Before you had to count on France. France had in the early 90s had 3.5 million tons. 3.5 million tons, more than Canada. Today, Canada has 2.7 for next year. 2 million tons. France is falling back to 375,000 tons 375,000 tons. Excuse me, 675,000 tons last year, and they go to 680 because they might have a better yield next year, but the area is going down, yield might be going up, so they might have the same production of 680,000 tons next year. Ukraine will come back to its normal production, which is around the 450,000, 500,000 tons. And what I said before, Russia, you have to count on it. That will be one of your main competitors for, I presume, for Canada. So the chickpeas in Russia, I got those figures from Stud Publishing from Mr. Brian Clensley. So they're quite stable. You can see they are 50,000 tons production in 2009, went a little bit down because of the weather. But normally you have a production of 50,000 tons, of which most of it will be exported. Most of it will be exported to where? In containers, to Asia, Middle East. They don't have much uses themselves in the country. So now the exports. I don't have any data from Russia. Unfortunately, impossible to get them. The only figures we have is from Ukraine and from France. And you see from 2009 up to 2011, more or less, the difference in export between feed and food is more or less the same. It's always 50% food, 50% feed, except for 2010. But if you think, okay, where's the feed going for export? The feed is going as yellow peas for fish food. The same quality which we're shipping, France is shipping to India, we send it to Norway for fish food. They want yellow peas. They want good quality yellow peas, and that's why they have, it's in a way it's wrong, the figures, because yellow peas for fish food are feed and not food. But I think they're the same quality as the yellow peas to India. And if we see the Ukraine is really feed. You see in 2011, 80,000 tons export, of which 70,000 tons has gone to 70,000 ton export has gone to Italy, to Spain, and that's mostly for compound feed. That's really feed quality. So this is the summary, a summary which is from 2009 to 2012. You see France, 545,000 tons, up to 1 million tons. Why 1 million tons in 2010 suddenly? Why an increase of so much? Why twice the production? Because of the subsidy. France has created a subsidy because they said, okay, in the early 90s we had 3.5 million tons. We're going back so fast, we need to grow more peas. So we gave a subsidy which was an envelope of a couple of million euros. And that was divided by the hectare you got. So all the farmers were calculating. So that is my envelope, 2.5 million euros, whatever it was, divided by the number of hectares. So I get 150 euros per hectare. Everyone was thinking that. So everyone was planting peas. So in 2010, they doubled the production. So they get half the subsidy because the envelope was the same. You had to only divide it by more acreage. So that's why it went down. And that will stop by this year. This is the last year we get the subsidy, but farmers they're not interested anymore. They're so disappointed by the French farmers, so disappointed by the yield of 3.7 against the wheat price. So and also the pea price in France nowadays, since 2 years, I will come back to that later on the price discussion, on the panel discussion for the prices for next year. So it's all priced over the wheat future market. So peas since last year and this year, farmer, you don't talk of a flat price, you talk about wheat price. So what is, depending on the price for the peas, is the wheat price. It's not the supply and demand for peas, no, it's just the wheat price. Everything is over the wheat price. If you guarantee a farmer that he will get $150 more than the wheat price, he will grow peas like crazy. But that's not the case today. Today you're about $90, $100 over the wheat price. So that's why farmers are not interested. They have 8 tons a hectare for wheat. They have 4.5 a hectare for peas. So double they get for the wheat. It's cheaper to grow peas. It's more expensive to grow wheat. But okay, it doesn't calculate. Farmers not interested. So coming back to the Ukraine, you see the figures are stable, 467, 452, 377 because of the dry weather in 2011, and in 2012, 472,000 tons. Russia is increasing every year a bit. In acreage, we saw it before. They had a good year in 2009, 1.3 million, 1.2 in 2010, 1.8 in 2011. And 2012, I think if they have a good crop, they can go 2 million tons. And out of that 2 million tons, they can export easily. They export already a lot also to Norway, to Denmark for the starch, because we have a big starch industry in Europe nowadays. I think Europe will use 450,000 tons of peas for starch. But why? Why peas? Because peas are gluten-free. And you have a huge demand for flour, gluten-free, and for yogurts, where you have your starch into the yogurts, which are gluten-free. So that's why you have an increase in demand, which is going From 5 years ago, 150,000 tons, we are now to 450,000 tons. So I think that's for today. So thank you very much. And if there's any question, I will be on the panel discussion for the prizes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just to put out records straight, I am Jairaj Patel and not Sudhakar Tomar, because unfortunately I think it's been mentioned in the pamphlet it's Sudhakar T. Well, at the outset, I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to the organizers of the Global Pulses Conclave to have me here to address this August gathering and to share 2 pennies worth of my thoughts with all of you. And I also take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers for the success of this conclave. As we were told yesterday that the registration reached 600 plus, so I think that was a tremendous job given the fact that this was a maiden venture. You would all agree that the past 5 years have been very turbulent years as far as commodity trading has been concerned. We saw oil prices boom to such an extent that there was a shift in the production of food, which was produced more for energy rather than for food. In fact, the world had come to debate whether food should be grown for food purposes or to provide energy. We have seen weather to be very erratic in this period, where we saw large areas of land being inundated with water and some areas practically left without any water. And this naturally impacted agricultural production. Pulses have not been a different story. They have not been an exception. And during this period, we have seen pulses prices rise to historical highs. There was a time, I think 5 years ago, yellow peas used to be traded at $180 a ton on CNF basis into India. And then we saw yellow peas being traded at $450 on FOB basis. We saw tuor, which was traded at $250, being traded at up to $1,200. So as a trader of pulses, there has been a lot of transparency and the flow of information in the last 5 years become so tremendous. The trader, in addition to weather, consumption, imports, has also to keep track of what is happening on the oil prices, what's happening other commodity prices, and for all you know, he also has to keep a track on the greed debt talks, because these are going to have an impact on the currency. We saw in India in the recent past that the currency devalued so drastically and so quickly, it didn't give anybody time to react. And within slightly over a month, we saw a correction as swift, if not drastic. I'm sure each one of us here who is a stakeholder in the pulses industry must have woken up one morning, at least in the last 4 or 5 months, I guess, asking himself or herself, what the hell am I doing in pulses trade? But pulses it is, and this is what we do, and when we come to the problems, we need to address these problems. So why pulses? Well, due to their ability to provide economical protein security, food security, and being good sources of protein-rich feed ingredients, pulses are an important food item. As crops, these improve soil fertility due to their ability to produce and fix nitrogen. Well, having had the opportunity to work in countries which form part of the Middle East and North Africa, which collectively are known as MENA, I would be concentrating on the potential in this region with regard to pulses. What is the area of interest? Now, if you see on the map here, the dark color countries are commonly accepted as the MENA countries, and sometimes the countries which are in light color are also considered as part of the MENA countries. MENA is a very important region for pulses. As in the Indian subcontinent, pulses provide protein and sustenance to the majority of the population in MENA countries. MENA is considered the birthplace of civilization and also pulses. It comprises of 19 on the dark-colored countries and 32 on the light-colored countries. I mean, there are a total of, if we say, 32 countries which form MENA. The population of MENA region in the least extent is about 381 million people, which is about 6% of the world's population. And on a greater extent, it is roughly 523 million people, which is about 9% of the world population. The figures vary depending upon what countries you are including in the region. It has an area of 15.5 million square kilometers, which is 9.41% of the world's land, again taking on the higher side. The economy tops, as per latest figures, about $5 trillion. And as of 2011, 8 of the 12 OPEC nations are within the MENA region. It is full of contrasts in terms of monetary values, incomes ranging from 1,061 in Yemen to 49,480 in Qatar as per 2011 estimates. The average per capita income is $8,594. But MENA has less than 2% of renewable fresh water. As per FAO report of 2011, the MENA region is vulnerable to climate change, increased temperatures, reduced precipitation, and rising sea levels. Water scarcity, which is highest in the world, will worsen. Climate-sensitive agriculture will be seriously affected. It employs only 12% of the workforce in agriculture. And although agriculture remains an important socio-economic sector, until recently, sector investment in all MENA countries has remained inadequate and unfortunately on low priority. The import food bill is about $60 billion. And amongst this, imports of pulses account for 18% of the world pulses crop. This, in fact, is the second largest import after the Indian subcontinent. The region also has the third largest consumption per capita of pulses after the Indian subcontinent and Latin America. Given the current situation, it shall need to increase its food supply significantly in the coming next 25 years. MENA, as I said, is either 19 or 32 countries, but who matter most in MENA? The 5 largest importers in MENA are Algeria, Egypt, Turkey, UAE, and Iran. Algeria, just an overview, land area of 2.4 million square kilometers. It is the second largest country in Africa, and in fact, it's the 10th largest in the world. But it has, of the 8.2 million hectares arable land, which is only 3.4% of the total land area of Algeria, with a GDP of 11 to 12% coming from agriculture, and only 14% of the labor force is engaged in agriculture. It produces wheat, barley, oats, grapes, olives, citrus, fruits, and amongst pulses, it imports beans, chickpeas, and lentils. Algeria, on an average, needs to import 175,000 metric tons annually to meet the deficit it has. Egypt, with a land area of 995,000 square kilometers and a population of 83 million, only 13.1% of the GDP is coming from agriculture, though it employs 32% in the labor force in agriculture. It produces cotton, rice, corn, wheat, beans, fruits, and vegetables. And it produces about 370,000 metric tons of various pulses such as beans, chickpeas, lentils, etc. But it still requires to import almost 350,000 metric tons, which is 50% of its consumption requirement to meet the deficit. Turkey. Turkey is one of the better economies within the MENA countries. And in fact, Turkey forms from the lighter color, that is, sometimes it gets included in the MENA region. It has a population of 73 million. 9.4% of the GDP comes from agriculture, and 30% of the labor force is engaged in agriculture. It produces tobacco, cotton, grain, olives, sugar, beets, hazelnuts, pulses, and citrus. Amongst pulses, chickpeas and lentils are main items, which account for 75% of the Turkish pulses production. And it imports mainly chickpeas, dry peas, beans, etc. from various origins. UAE. UAE is it's 83,000 square kilometers with a population of only 8.25 million. Very little agriculture, employs only 7%, only 1.1% GDP comes from agriculture. But what about UAE? What is noticeable for UAE is that the imports have increased to almost 440,000 tons over the last 2-3 years. Although local consumption is low, it's a transit point for various countries where the products go either as whole or as splits. Iran. Iran is another major consumer. It has a land area of 1.5 million square kilometers, population of 75 million people. Almost 11% GDP is from agriculture, 25% labor is involved in agriculture. Amongst various products produces is wheat, rice, other grains, sugar, beets, sugarcane, fruits, nuts, cotton. And amongst pulses, it produces beans, chickpeas, and lentils. But still, Iran imports approximately 150,000 metric tons of pulses each year. What are the factors which affect pulses trade in these countries? Well, first and foremost is the political instability. In the recent past, we have seen this region has been very unstable. The Arab Spring has seen a fallout, and the region has seen toppling of governments in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya. Syria is on the boil, and Yemen can anytime erupt again. Government and quarantine policies are quite difficult here. If you ship something to Algeria, and God forbid if it is rejected by the health authorities, you could literally be playing with your grandchild and wondering if that cargo ever got out of that country. Weather naturally has an impact, but as I said in the FAO report, they said the weather is having an impact on the production in this region. Rumors, misinformation, domestic production has an impact. Prices amongst the domestic production, Turkey being a producer, if it has a less crop, it can impact prices in the origins. Various prices in the world prices, other products, prices of other commodities. We have seen Egyptians stop buying red split lentils after a certain point of time. Exchange rates, a weak currency makes for expensive imports. And we are seeing that, for instance, in Syria, the exchange rate has really gone up, as it has happened in Iran, where exchange rate has gone up from 1,200 toman a dollar to 2,000 toman to a dollar now. Foreign exchange availability is a major concern. One could be very happy doing trade in Sudan, never knowing when the LC will actually come. Likewise, after imposition of sanctions on the central bank in Iran, they are facing huge difficulties in raising foreign exchange to pay for their imports. Well, when trading in this region, there are a few things you may well want to know. The contract is written, it is signed, but it has no meaning. Even if you have a 50% advance, it will not help you. Just to cite an instance, I mean, a couple of years ago, the sugar prices had gone up, and as all things happen in commodity, they had come down. One of the buyers who had placed an order for purchase of sugar thought that it's not to his advantage to take the delivery, and he needed a reason to get out. So when he sees the cargo before taking delivery, he says, "My God, I can't take this cargo because I told you to stitch the bag with green thread. You have stitched it white thread." And he refused to take the cargo. You can go into arbitration, but these arbitration awards are practically unenforceable in these countries. Information is difficult to obtain, is often unreliable. Destination prices depend a lot on the origins. Relationships are key. It makes a big difference how you approach your business partner, and developing a relationship definitely leads to a better business relationship. You need to know your buyer, broker, your market, and your product. You never know what's going to happen next. You may need to juggle things. Try and have a plan B ready. You need to understand the religion and culture. This again helps a lot in developing relationship, but again go into developing business. Organizations are flat. There is practically no professional setup available. And markets are adventurous. You do a business with somebody, you write in the contract you need the LC by a particular date. It may not come. I mean, 9 out of 10 times the LC will not come by that time. Now, it's your call whether you want to continue with the covering of your product or whatever. It's not the buyer has a different intention, it's the way the things work. But the adventure will manifest when you cover the product, the LC doesn't come, and the prices fall. So Middle East and North Africa, it still is a beautiful country. I have a short film to show you. So in addition to trading pulses, you have a beautiful land to visit also. Just food for thought for commodity trading. Well, Virendra in the morning beat me to this when he came up with his beautiful poetic lyrics on trading fraternity's situation as of today. But what is commodity trading? There's a small story. There's a village. A man from a city comes to the village, gathers all the villagers and says, I need monkeys. And for each monkey you bring to me, I'll give you 10 rupees. So villagers stop doing everything, start catching monkeys. After a while, the population of monkeys starts to go down. They come and tell him the monkeys are not available now. He said, no, renew your efforts. I'll double the price. I'll give you 20 bucks now. So villagers again start going around catching monkeys. They go far away. But monkeys eventually aren't left anymore there to catch. The villagers come back and tell this man. So he says, okay, no problem. You try to continue to catch monkeys. I will be going to the city